Why do you think Western culture focuses more on what we do not have or what we think we need rather than faithfully responding to God's grace and depending on God's grace to sustain us? It seems like we who live in Western culture want to be wealthy with possessions rather than wealthy in Christ.
As I have practiced certain spiritual disciplines, including generosity and growing generosity and looking at my capacity for giving, I've discovered that I have been shaped by a culture that has given me a false message about where real meaning and joy comes from. And since before I can remember, I have been bombarded by voices telling me that I need to buy this, or I need this product, or I need to take this trip somewhere. And I don't want to put all of that down, but the message is, if you'll do that, the empty places in your life will be filled. And it's a false message. And it's contrary to the gospel message that all of that is filled by Jesus Christ, not what we buy or accumulate or think we have to have. I was on a spiritual retreat experience with Richard Foster, who wrote Celebration of Discipline. And at one point he prayed a prayer, and I don't know that this is going to translate well, but he said, "Dear God, bless our needers and our wanters so that we may come to want the things we really need." You have to think about that a little bit, because we get all of that confused. But we have been shaped by a culture that has confused us about what brings true joy and meaning and happiness to life. And as disciples, we have to question that and make personal decisions that the world we live in is one that is envisioned and shaped by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that is the future. That's the real future that's coming.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, as you're speaking, I'm reminded, and you've had these experiences because you've been to Africa many more times than I have, but I remember a Malawi congregation we went to visit, and they talked about 3 months a year there's a drought, and the church, because of the generosity of people who give to World Mission Ties, the church sends money to that village. And so the pastor stood up to thank us and to say, go back and thank the people for sharing, because we buy grain, and nobody in the community of Christ died. But what struck me was, he said, and we shared the grain with everyone in the village, and no one in the village died. Because in that culture, what's most important is that everyone's life is of value, and so they don't hoard to take care of their own, they give so that everyone has life.
It's more of a community perspective on human life and what makes us human, which is in relationship to others, rather than an individualistic perspective, which is how the culture in many Western nations is headed. It's more about individualism than it is about the community. We're well positioned as a church to offer a counter message. Our very name, Community of Christ. It's community in and through Christ that we discover who we are as human beings and our destiny. And that example shows the relationship between an understanding of community, the nature of the gospel, and practical expression of that through sharing.